Hi, I'm William Stewart. Welcome back to our verse by verse study on the book of Hebrews. Welcome. We're in chapter 5, an exciting portion where the author is comparing Christ and all his advantages to the high priest. And it's part of a series of the first half of Hebrews as the author writes to these immature Hebrew believers, telling them to maintain their faith after they've been saved by their faith alone in Jesus' death and resurrection. So he's saying that he's contrasting the high priest, which of course was a type of the coming Messiah. The Jews knew this in the Old Testament, that Messiah would come to take away their sins, and the priest was part of the typing of this. And because he made sacrifices for sins every year. But he himself was imperfect. He had to sacrifice for himself. He had to do it over and over again. And here's Christ, who also our high priest, perfect, only had to sacrifice once. And it was efficacious, as opposed to the Old Testament high priest, efficacious to salvation. So we're in verse 9 and 10 today of chapter 5, and talking about Christ and his becoming, his struggles going to the cross, as we talked about in verse 7, but also he had to learn to become a faithful high priest in the man side. Remember, Christ was all man, all God, and Christ suffered on the man side at a minimum and going to the cross. And he has also had to learn to be perfect as he grew as a man and learn and experience, so he could be our faithful, helpful high priest now, as we know from the end of Hebrews 2 and 4. So having been made perfect, this is where we get the word teleos. Hey, how about that? A mature man, or literally perfect. He became the author, and literally here in the original Greek, that means cause of eternal salvation to those who obey him. So what's obey him mean here? I think the gospel, there are three other times, 1 Peter 4:17, 2 Thessalonians 1:18, Romans 12:16, that those who did not obey the gospel were not included in God's future plans for salvation. So I think here it's obeying the gospel, they became Christian, otherwise salvation by faith alone. So again, the contrast here, the high priest couldn't do that. The law could not do that. They could not bring salvation. At best, they've caused God to forbear, to delay our deserved wrath until Christ lovingly came and died for us. Verse 10, called of God, a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. Now, here it is again, and we'll keep seeing Melchizedek a number of times. So importantly, this Melchizedek, we read from Genesis 14, further explained in Psalm 110, 4, that was the priest and king of Jerusalem, to whom Abraham tithed after he got Lot back, his brother Lot back, from the Mesopotamians. And Melchizedek blessed him. We're going to learn more about him in chapter 7. Very important figure, a type of Christ, indicating that he's of a different priesthood than the high priest in the Old Testament, which was of Aaron, Moses' brother, from the book of Exodus in the law. So the fact that Abraham tithed, he submitted himself to Melchizedek. So here's the progenitor of Aaron and Moses bowing to somebody higher, or submitting themselves to somebody higher, indicating the order of Melchizedek is more important than that of Aaron, has a higher authority, and this is the priesthood of Christ. this is one reason. Another reason, the law is not efficacious today. It's not being used because it was replaced by a better law of Christ, a better priesthood. And of course, Christ fulfilled the law. He's Messiah, the Messiah in which the law envisioned. Okay, so to review here, importantly, Christ, by being a man, going to the cross, made himself the perfect priest, high priest, not only to die for our sins and become the author of eternal salvation, but also to one who sympathizes with our weaknesses. Also, he is a high priest of a different order, a better order than that of the Aaronic priesthood, the priesthood of Melchizedek. Okay, we'll take a break then from this narrative next time to the end of the chapter, talking about an application to what the author has just covered in these prior verses in this chapter and in the comparison to the high priest. Glad you're with me today. I hope you'll join me next time. I hope this study is helpful in such a marvelous book of the Bible. Goodbye for now.